Okay, let's start with Prabhuji, would you like us to do the Manglacharan, or would you like to do the, you'd like us to? Okay, Shashwin, let's do the Manglacharan.
Okay,
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Dhyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Swapitam Yena Bhutale Swayambhuvakadamayam Vedanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Udapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavum Shri Rupam Sakrajadam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Swavadodam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Radhigna Shri Vishakhanvitam Sya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Kopisa Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanjakalpataruvasya Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hare
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Shashwin, for the wonderful recital of the Manglacharan. Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you for joining in. Today we have Shobha Mataji and Minesh Prabhuji. Thank you very much for joining in. We are really grateful to you. We meet at the same time every day, including the weekends from 8 to 9 in Kenya. And now it will be this link because now the center has a Zoom link as well. So we won't be using our personal ones. So thank you very much for joining. And without wasting any more time, I'd like to ask Kamal Prabhuji, who has joined us all the way from London. Prabhuji, thank you very much for your time. We have been reading the Bhagavad Gita since lockdown, since 2 years, and we have yesterday finished the last text, and we are very grateful today. This is a revision class, and we are really grateful to you for joining us today, and you have the hard task of summarizing our 2.5 years work in just under an hour now, so in 45 minutes. So Prabhuji, kindly unmute, and I hand over to you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Matji. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Matji, would you be able to give me screen sharing capabilities? I've got a few slides I'd like to share, which might help us.
Prabhuji, are you able to do it now?
Yes, it looks like so, yeah.
What bolis? Make it only the number, Charlie. Then makan the juice and the
Mataji, are you able to see this slide now?
No, not yet, Prabhu.
Okay. Now
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Oh, thank you. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining. I'm definitely not qualified to summarize the entire Gita, but I will. I'll try my best to kind of recap what you've studied. Massive congratulations for getting through the Gita, and kudos to everyone at ISKCON Eldoret for going through. I'm just going to recite the invocation prayer, and then we can get into it. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, so here we have the Bhava Gita. I definitely don't want to take credit for this presentation. What I've done is I've studied the works of someone called Ikshvaku Prabhu, who does something called the Gita for everyone. And here he summarizes, he puts the Bhava Gita into bite-sized chunks, which people can understand. So using his kind of methodologies, I'm going to go through. So an agenda for today, I hope everyone can see that okay. But agenda for today is, there's essentially 3 topics which are covered in the Gita. I mean, there's many topics, but 3 focal points. So I'll kind of briefly touch upon them. And then I've broken them down into 3 words: you, Krishna, and prison house, and then the conclusion. Hopefully this will make sense as we go along. I'll keep an eye on the time because I know we haven't got much time and a lot to get through. But if you don't remember anything from this presentation, if you could just remember those 3 words: you, Krishna, and prison house, and then hopefully we'll have time for some discussion at the end. So this Bhava Gita essentially covers 3 topics: Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Now, does anyone know what the meaning of these 3 words are?
Which is Sambandha means the relationship you have with Krishna, or just relationship?
Yes. Yes. So Sambandha is relationship, Abhideya, activities within our relationship, and Prayojana, the ultimate goal of life. So Sambandha, the relationship that we have with God, and essentially answering questions like, who are we? What are we doing here? Abhideya, activities in our relationship with God, and Prayojana, which is what is the ultimate goal of life. But I thought, okay, so it can be difficult to remember Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana, and especially when we're explaining this to people who may not be familiar with Sanskrit and the teachings of the Gita. So to break this down, Ikshvaku Prabhu made a brilliant analogy, and he's broken it down into 3 words. The 3 words are you, Krishna, and prison house. And these, the Acharyas actually break down the Bhava Gita into 3 sections: chapters 1 to 6, 7 to 12, and then 13 to 18. So these relate to these 3 words, and hopefully I can explain. It will make some sense in a second. So first of all, you. So why do I mention you? It's because the first 6 chapters in the Bhava Gita refer to essentially to us. So Krishna is talking to Arjuna, who is explaining this concept of identity. So essentially, what we are experiencing at the moment is amnesia. We've completely forgotten who we really are, what's our true identity. And so we act out in a way which is not conducive to our entity, to our real identity as a spirit soul. And instead, we're acting in so many ways which are against this. Here I've summarized some key words which, if possible, you could remember with regards to each chapter. So the first chapter is observing the battlefield. So what happens when Arjuna sees the battlefield of Kurukshetra? He starts to lament. Now, we may not be on a battlefield, but in one sense, we are on a battlefield every day. We're in a battle with our own mind. And although we may not be lamenting over the death of loved ones, or sometimes that may be the case or potential, but we definitely don't have a physical battle to fight. However, I'm sure that each and every one of us, in some ways, face lamentation. It could be a loss of job, could be a loss of health, could be a loss of loved one, or it could be a difficult substance, a loss of a relationship. All kinds of things are happening in this disturbing material world. So here, Arjuna is lamenting, and essentially the Bhava Gita was spoken so we can relate with Arjuna and overcome our lamentation. The next chapter context of the Gita summarized. So many beautiful verses in this chapter, but this here, Krishna is actually explaining our real identity, our identity as a spirit soul. So if we knew really that we were a spirit soul, Krishna wonderfully explains in the second chapter, Dehinosmin yatha dehe gomaram yovanam jara tata dehantara prapti diras tatra namuiti. So as an embodied soul continually passes from a boyhood to youth to old age, similarly, a soul passes into another body at death, and a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. A very, very, very famous verse. But here Krishna is really giving us who are we? You know, what is our position? So Prabhupada uses this term constitutional position often. And he states that everyone has a dharma, everything has its dharma. So just like if you were to eat some chilies or use some chilies in cooking, I don't know if many of you like to cook, and I like to cook. And if you put some chilies in the cooking and then suddenly the dish turned out sweet, you could say that the chilies weren't doing their dharma, right? Because the chili's dharma is to be hot and add some spice. Same way, if we added some sugar to a dish and it turned out bitter, then we'd say that the sugar isn't doing its dharma, its constitutional position, which is to add sweetness. In the same way that as a human, our constitutional position, one thing which we can do, which no other animal can do, is we're able to think, we're able to philosophize. And essentially, our constitutional position is to realize our relationship with God. How many lifetimes have we gone through as different animals? And in each of those lifetimes, we're just busy eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And any animal can do this, but only the human animal is able to realize God. Only the human is able to realize God. So this is our constitutional position. Next, we come on to the concept of duty. So in the next chapter, Krishna is talking about, so Arjuna, he wants to give up the battle and go into the forest, and become a renunciant. After hearing all this knowledge, he says, oh, well, I'm a soul, you know, so surely that means that it doesn't matter, you know, if I engage in the battle or not, because, you know, Krishna, you've already killed everyone, and what is the, but no, Krishna says, no, we still have a duty to perform. And this duty performed with the right consciousness will enable us to advance in our spirituality, advance and become closer to him. So we still have a duty, a material duty, and it's not like we can just give this up. So it's important that we still perform our prescribed duties. Just like some of us may be parents, some of us may have jobs, some of us may have dependents. It's not that after coming across this knowledge, it's not that we can just give it up and pretend like, oh, well, they're just a soul, I'm just a soul, you know, what is use of the material duties? No, because there's a reaction for that. Next, Krishna talks in the 4th chapter, he talks about knowledge. So the chapter is entitled Transcendental Knowledge. And within this chapter, he, going along with this theme of we're essentially trying to find out our identity, we understand now through reading the 3rd chapter that we still have duty, but we're getting a higher knowledge, a transcendental knowledge of how to really realize, self-realize. So Krishna's giving this knowledge. Then finally, we in the 5th chapter, Krishna comes to the point where he's giving us the results of the actions. So action, the chapter is called Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. So what happens when we apply this knowledge? So often there's one thing that we're all trying to achieve, through various means in this world. It may be we're trying to achieve a bigger house, a certain type of job, a certain relationship, a certain position. And even when we come to Krishna consciousness and start practicing spirituality, we still may be trying to achieve certain things. But ultimately, out of all these things, what we're really looking for is, there's this one word, shanti. What we're looking for is peace. And through all these things, we think that they'll give us some peace. But ultimately, Krishna is explaining here that the results of applying this knowledge that we've gotten about our identity, our duty, this transcendental knowledge will give us peace, shanti. And so that moves us on to the next chapter, the chapter 6, which is explaining, which is about thinking. So thinking about this knowledge, reflecting on this knowledge. And I just wanted to refer to one verse from this chapter. So I believe it's the text 47 within this. Yes. So, and of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So here we're thinking about how to apply thinking about Krishna, thinking. I remember there's one occasion where I had to go to a meeting in central London in the evening. So I went to the city. I didn't know it very well, so I followed my maps on Google Maps. I found that I was driving around for a long time. As you can imagine, in large cities, it can be very difficult to find parking. And so I parked up my car, and I use an app which puts a pin on where the car is. And then I hurriedly went off to the meeting. And it was some distance away as well, the meeting from where I'd parked. I got out of the meeting, and I realized that the app on my phone wasn't working. So I'd lost, I couldn't find my car. And I was in the middle of London, which is a very large city. And I began to panic. I really began to panic and thinking, if I can't find my car, I won't be able to get to work the next day. If I leave my car overnight in London, it will surely get clamped. Someone will put a huge clamp on it, and I'll get a very large fine. And all these thoughts were coming into my head. And then I began to think. At this time, I was quite new, but I was practicing Krishna consciousness. And I just thought to myself, what do I have to worry about in the grand scheme of things? Let me just meditate on Krishna, and if I don't find my car, what's the worst that can happen? I'll get a letter, and so I just walked along and just started chanting and thinking, if Krishna, please help me if you can find my car, and if I can't, so be it. And as I was walking along streets along London, and just chanting, I felt so much more peaceful, just thinking of Krishna, or trying to think of Krishna. And at that very moment, I walked down the street and there was my car. So I know it may seem like a mundane example, but this was an example for me how that in life, we're always going to face problems. We're always going to find reasons to lament, to face difficulties in life. But if we're able to remember Krishna during these difficult moments, if we're able to revert back to the teachings of the Bhava Gita and remember our true identity, it gives a sense of perspective. And ultimately, the philosophy helps us to see what I like to see. There was once a man, and he was looking for a forest. But he said, all I can see is trees, but I'm looking for the forest. So he was, of course, in the forest, but he couldn't see the forest from the trees. In the same way that often when we're in difficult situations, it's difficult for us to see the bigger picture. At that very moment, all we can see is the difficulty that we're facing. In my instance, all I could think about was my car and work and the fines. Another instance, that maybe we may be facing difficulties in relationships, and all we can think about is that difficulty in the relationship. Or we may have lost something important to us, and all we can think about is that one thing. But by practice of Krishna consciousness, by trying to connect ourselves to Krishna, by connecting through the philosophy, connecting through his holy name, and hearing about him, it helps us to see the forest from the trees, helps us to see the bigger picture. So this is how Krishna is explaining to think of him. So now that moves us on to the next section, which is Krishna, God. So here in the 7th chapter, Krishna is talking about the knowledge of the absolute. So now imagine a scenario where we're an employee and we're looking for a job, this job of life. And who is the boss? The boss is Krishna. So Krishna in the 7th chapter is explaining the knowledge of the absolute, which the absolute refers to the ultimate, the supreme personality of Godhead, who is Krishna. Now, in the very last text of this chapter, chapter 30, Krishna says, those in full conscious of me who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So here Krishna, he's not bragging, he's not showing off, he's not being boastful, but he's just stating the fact that he is the boss, he is the Lord, he is the Supreme Lord of everything, even the Devas. So in the very next chapter, Krishna talks, imagine Krishna is the boss. So then he talks about the very next chapter is called Attaining the Supreme. But here it's within, we could say it's likened to insurance or life insurance. So Krishna has explained he's the boss, but then he now is explaining why should we work for him? You know, why work for Krishna? Why work for this boss? So one of my favorite verses in the Bhava Gita is within this chapter, and I've mentioned it before. Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravarti nojana mamuteya tukonteya punarjamana vidyate. So Krishna here is saying that of all the material planets in the material world, down from Pitraloka up to Brahmaloka, all the places of misery wherein repeated birth and death takes place. But those who reach my abode, O son of Kunti, never take birth again. So the reason we work for Krishna, the reason we work in consciousness of Krishna, and the reason we want to think of Krishna is because we're stuck in this continuous cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. And we'll never be able to escape this cycle. We can attain we may be able to attain the heavenly planets, we'll be aspiring for greater opulence, but even in the heavenly planets, even the Devas, they have a limited lifespan. And then they'll have to go through the suffering of birth and death. But if we work in Krishna consciousness, we can escape this this cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. And it's so important. I remember as a young, I was probably 11 years old. At that time, I didn't have very much knowledge. And I was in school and I was in religious studies. And the teacher was very excited because I'm from a Hindu background. So they thought, oh, brilliant. We've got a Hindu, we've got a Muslim, and we've got a Christian. Let's bring them all up. So she brought us all up, sat us to the front of the classroom and said, so then everyone started asking us questions about our faith. And of course, sadly, I was very ignorant at that time with regards to our philosophy. I was very ignorant when it came to the Bhava Gita. And this brings me on to the next chapter, chapter 9, which is the most confidential knowledge. And what's more confidential than a password? So what is the password? What is the one word that opens the door to Krishna? And that is devotion, and that word is bhakti. So that is the password that opens the door to Krishna. Now, in the 9th chapter, the reason I tell you this story about when I was at school, because in the 9th chapter, there is there's some very pertinent verses in relation to this. So Krishna in the 9th chapter talks about how those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with a faith actually only worship me, O son of Kunti. They do in a wrong way. So remember, there was a boy of Muslim faith and Islamic faith, and he looked at me as I was sat in the classroom. He said, "Oh, that Hinduism, it's a bit silly, really, isn't it? That you've got all these gods and things like that. It's a bit silly, really. So many gods, you know, it can't be real." And I sadly, I looked down and I didn't know any better. I said, "Yeah," and I was ashamed. I was ashamed of the faith because I didn't know any better. But only now, thankfully, by the grace of the devotees, by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, we have this knowledge, and it's clearly explained. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. There aren't many gods. There's one God. Our faith is a monotheistic religion. The devas are demigods. So yes, we respect them. We offer them our greatest respects. But ultimately, there's so many pastimes how the devas worship Krishna, whether it is Lord Indra worshipping Krishna after the Govardhan pastime, whether it's Lord Brahma reciting the Brahma Samhita worshipping Krishna, whether it's Lord Shiva trying to enter Vrindavan and meditating on Krishna. We can see so many instances. Ganesh worshipping Lord Nrsingadev. So many instances where actually we look at the devas and they are actually worshipping Krishna. They're actually worshipping Vishnu. So here we can see that it's Krishna clearly explains that there is only one supreme Lord, and that is him, that is Krishna. And that what opens the door to him is bhakti. Pushpam pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakti prachati. Offers me with devotion, even a leaf, a flower, or a fruit or water, I will accept it. But the key is devotion. So that is what opens the door to Krishna. We then move on to chapter 10. So here we have a very, very important chapter. And the word I'm using for this chapter is bhaktas. So in order to get to Krishna, we know the key is the password, is bhakti. And so we must become a bhakta, a practitioner of bhakti. And within this chapter, there's 4 very, very important verses known as the Chaturshloki. So these verses are considered to be almost like a summary of the entire Gita. If you can familiarize yourself with just these 4 verses, the essence of Krishna consciousness is within these verses. So first of all, in 10.8, Krishna explains that he's the source of absolutely everything. In 10.9, he explains who his devotees are, who the bhaktas are, and how they're very dear to him. And so like this, he confirms the way in which we can come to Krishna, and this is by becoming a bhakta and removing the darkness of ignorance from our hearts, is by becoming a bhakta. And out of all the opulences that Krishna has, the most dear to him, the most dearest thing to him are his devotees. So just try to become a devotee of the Lord. The next word and the next chapter we get to is 3 forms. So the next chapter is the universal form. But here Krishna explains that he's actually got, he displays 3 forms here, which is the universal form, which is very terrifying when Arjun first sees it. He then shows Arjun his Narayan form, four-armed form. And finally, he displays his form as Shyamasundar. And so, again, these 3 forms why is this significant? It's because ultimately Krishna, he does have different moods. So within the universal form, it's very almost terrifying. You can see so many gaping mouths, such a huge expanse of form here. Within the form of Narayan, and we can explain if you wish to go to Vaikuntha there and worship Krishna in the form of awe and reverence, then you can enter and worship him in that way. But what Krishna really, really desires from us is a relationship, a loving, sweet relationship. And this can be attained when he is in his form of Lord Shamasundar in Goloka Vrindavan. And this is what Krishna ultimately desires. And this is why he has so many loving exchanges with his devotees. And ultimately why ours is such a personal philosophy, not impersonal. It's because everyone has a unique relationship with Krishna. And here, in the, I refer to the text 55, where Krishna says, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. So that is the forms that Krishna displays. And finally, we come in this section about Krishna, about God, is essentially a manual. Okay, so how do we perform bhakti? And chapter 12 is entitled Devotional Service, which is essentially a manual on how do we perform this. So Krishna gives various verses on how to perform this devotional service. So herein within explain. I'm aware that we're running low on time, so I'll try and get through the last section, which is chapters 13 to 18. And the word I'd like you to remember here is prison house. So why do I use the word prison house? And what has that got to do with chapters 13 to 18? Well, the reason is because chapters 13 to 18, there's a lot about the material world, which is essentially a prison. So we're essentially in this prison for many reasons. Our situation, this body is a prison within which the soul resides. And we're maybe due to our karma from past lives. And I know in previous classes, we've discussed karma, and the laws of karma are so very, very complex. In a wonderful class given by Madan Prabhu, we discussed Dhritarashtra, how that he was lamenting about his situation and about having lost all of his sons, and he couldn't understand. And he has it explained to him that many, many lifetimes ago, he was a hunter who'd killed 100 birds in their nest and set fire to their nest, and the flames actually blinded the father bird, and hence why it takes a lot of good karma to have even one child. What to speak of all of the Kauravas that he had. So he had to accumulate so many pious karmic credits before he could then conceive these children, the Kauravas, and then get hit with the reaction. So in this way, we're constantly stuck in this cycle of karma in the material world. So what do we need? See, when we go to prison, when we get sent in prison, we always need a good lawyer. So in the chapter 13, Krishna talks about Paramatma. So the word is Paramatma. And the Paramatma is essentially our eternal witness. It's the witness and the lawyer, and with us, we're residing within the heart 24/7, always. So all of our actions are sanctioned by the Paramatma. So the soul desires, and the Paramatma then gives the sanction to which this action can happen. So it's said that there's 3 levels of realization. There is the Brahman realization, which is Krishna's effulgence. The second is Paramatma realization, Krishna who dwells within the heart of every living being. And then Bhagavan realization. So even higher than that is realizing Krishna himself. And how can we do this? How can we get to this Bhagavan realization? Well, the next chapter is the modes of material nature. So these are likened to prison bars. So the modes of material nature, the modes of ignorance, passion, and even goodness can bind us within this material world as we're constantly trapped. And within this chapter, Krishna talks about many different things in the modes. And I know we've discussed the modes at length. However, we can actually use these modes if we have the right knowledge from the Bhava Gita and we examine our lives and reflect and think about them. We can actually use these modes to elevate ourselves and get out of this prison, which leads me on to the next chapter, which is chapter 15. And the word I'd like you to remember for this is escape. So we're in this prison and we need an escape plan to get out of here. So what is that escape plan? So that is actually explained within this chapter. The verse 15. I'm seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So the escape plan is the Vedas. So if we can get to know the Vedas inside out, then we can escape out of this prison. Chapter 16, then we're moving on to the divine and demoniac natures. So the word I'd like you to remember here is inmates. So when we're in this prison, if you're in prison, if you associate with the wrong people, the wrong prisoners, then you may get into trouble, and you could even get an extended sentence in prison. So here within the divine and demoniac natures, Krishna is explaining what qualities belong to those of godly people, and what qualities belong to those of demoniac people, and how we can maybe identify the demoniac qualities within us and try to slowly work on them, eliminate them, and practice these godly qualities instead, such as, so it's listed here, but humility and patience, forgiveness. And that way we can elevate ourselves. And then 17, now we're getting to the climax of the Bhava Gita. So the word I'd like you to remember here is key. So key, what is the key to escape? So within the Bhava Gita, in the 17th chapter, there's a verse which refers to these three words, Om Tat Sat. Does anyone know what the meaning of this Om Tat Sat?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Sorry, I'm going to try. I might be completely wrong, so please do correct me. So Om is the transcendental sound, and that includes the entire knowledge of the Vedas anywhere, but it is also that sound. Tat is that you? Or I'm not right, but Sat is that truth?
Yes, very good.
And Sat.
Yes, so thank you very much, Panchali Mataji. Very wonderfully explained for the literal translation of Om Tat Sat. So this is Om Tat Sat, as Panchali Mataji very nicely explained. The literal translation is there. But when we put these words together, what it essentially means, or it's, and you'll often see Prabhupada sometimes signing his letters, writing Om Tat Sat. Why does he do that? Because the eternal truth, as Mataji says, and earlier in the Gita, Krishna actually says that he is the transcendental sound, Om. So here, Om Tat Sat actually means everything belongs to that supreme. Everything belongs to Krishna. So the key is understanding that everything belongs to Krishna. And in that way, if everything belongs to Krishna, then we need to offer everything to him. And if we're able to work in that consciousness, that is the key to escape out of this prison house, the material world. Then finally, we get to the 18th chapter. And the word for this is surrender. and how to perform devotional service. So the problem is, the Vedas, they're very vast. Who's got time this day and age to read and study all of the Vedas? There's many yagnas and there's no qualified brahmanas. It's very complicated, to perform all these yagnas, to follow all these rules and regulations. And it's very, very difficult in this day and age, even in years gone by, what to speak of this day and age. We have no time. So then Krishna simplifies it. He says, forget about all religions, forget about all these rules and regulations, just surrender unto me. And this is a very, very famous verse that we discussed the other day, 1866. So 1866, Sarvadam Parityaja. So abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So surrender is the climax of the Bhava Gita, which is essentially going to help us escape from this prison house. So an overview is that we talked about you, so us, essentially our identity, who we are. And we talked about how in the first chapter, Arjun's lamenting, as we do many times in life, we lament. We become disconnected from our real identity. We may even forget our duties or be unsure about what our duties are. I remember once I was in a class with His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj, and I was complaining about my job and I wanted to give it up. And he explained that and as I explained earlier, that as a human being, we all have two duties. So we have a specific material duty, which we must carry out, but every single human being also has a spiritual duty, which is to become self-realized and realize God. Then we talked about the knowledge which Krishna gives us and the results of applying this knowledge and how we can think about this and think about Krishna. And then in the second section, Krishna talks about he is the boss of everything. He is the supreme, although there may be many devas who work for him. And what is the benefits? What do we get? What's our life insurance for working for Krishna? And what is that special word, that password, which is bhakti? And then who needs to, what do we need to become a bhakta to perform this? And then in the 11th chapter, the forms of Krishna. The 12th chapter, a manual on how to perform this devotional service, a manual to perform this job, this spiritual duty. And then we come to the final section, which is a prison house and the Paramatma, Krishna within the heart, the prison bars of the material world, the modes of material nature, and how we can actually utilize the modes if we understand them correctly to elevate our consciousness. The Vedas provide the escape plan to get out of the material world. But we must avoid the inmates of the material world, of the prison house, and be wary of associating with fallen people, but also associating with, this more so is associating with bad qualities and developing bad qualities. Instead, we must look to develop divine qualities and elevate our consciousness. And then Krishna finally talks about the key to is working, whatever we do, being in consciousness of him and remembering Om Tat Sat, that everything belongs. The truth is that everything comes from the Supreme, that belongs to the Supreme. And finally, Krishna says, forget about all religions, rules and regulations, just surrender unto him and you'll surely come to him. So that was a conclusion of there's a lot to get through there. I appreciate it was a lot of information. Please forgive me for any mistakes. And the conclusion is that Krishna consciousness is not an easy path. We often forget our true identity, but by continually studying the Bhava Gita, by associating with devotees and by practicing Krishna consciousness, by chanting the holy names of the Lord, we can slowly but surely elevate our consciousness and come to that point of surrendering to Krishna. And then we'll achieve, even in this life, we can achieve shanti, we can achieve peace no matter what our situation. And at the end of this life, we can pass the final test of life, which is death, and exit the cycle of birth and death and go home back to Godhead, back to Krishna. So there's a few thoughts that I want to share on the Bhava Gita. I appreciate we don't have much time, but I'd more than welcome any comments, corrections, or questions. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Wow, that was excellent to summarize the whole Bhagavad Gita the way you did. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. I'll open this up and Sandhya, you have a question. You are at work and you can't talk, but you can ask
Hare
a question.
Krishna, Mataji, and Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, and all devotees. Yes, I am at work, but there was one question which I do want to ask, because Prabhuji, Prabhuji, I'm originally and well, in this material world, I'm a Punjabi, we are Kshatriyas, and I started doing Krishna consciousness only, well, when COVID started. And I prayed to Lord Shiva, I prayed to Lord, to Mata Rani, and Lord Krishna, I only came to know during this COVID time. But that just, and I have kind of reached the end of Gita without doing all the chapters, because I joined it a little late, and in between here and there, listening to all Prabhujis wherever I could, I became a bit obsessed with Krishna consciousness. I've traveled a long path in this. I've given up meat, so not very Kshatriya anymore. But Prabhuji, please forgive me if I sound, a very defensive person. Prabhuji, you said you were sitting in a meeting and someone told you, oh, Hinduism and blah, blah, and lots of gods. I'm sure you've been into this way before me. Well, could you, yes, we have got lots of devas, and on which so many Indians have lived their lives on, praying to various people. They have had their blessings. So when someone said to them, could you not have said, you are also only praying to the messenger of God? And there must have been many messengers before your Allah who you pray to, and many will probably come. Why did you feel ashamed? Because that makes me feel very saddened that you were ashamed or felt bad, because I would have probably acted, I would have defended, I would not have put my head down and felt bad, because they also pray to, they say, no, I'm the son of, God or messenger. So there is no different religion, and none of the religion anywhere knows the Father. They are also in doubt. We also say that. So, Prabhuji, why did you feel like that? Why? Not have said it.
Yeah, such a nice question, and thank you for also sharing your journey into Krishna consciousness. Really, really inspiring, and I can relate a lot to what you've said within your journey as well. So yeah, I was 11 years old at the time, and I think the reason why I looked down and I felt ashamed.
Oh, sorry, Prabhuji, I didn't know you were 11. I take back all my words, Prabhuji.
No,
don't
it's
even have
okay,
to explain.
No,
Prabhu,
so I think
I'm nearly double your age. I feel really bad now. I swear, I didn't know you were 11. I'm sorry, Prabhu.
At that time, I was 11 years old. When I had, I was in school, and I was only 11, and I got pulled to the front of the class, and I didn't know any better. So I think the reason I felt ashamed, and I think I'm glad that I shared this, because I'm sure there's so many Hindus out there who don't know much about their faith, about their religion, don't know so much about the teachings of the Bhava Gita. And in fact, I'd read the Bhava before I came to Krishna consciousness about 7 years ago. I had read the Gita, but a different version, many, many times, maybe about 6-7 times. And then I happened to live with a devotee, and he asked me some basic questions, and I couldn't answer them. So it's understandable that so many Hindus maybe even lack faith in whatever form of worship they do, and it's essentially just become a ritual. And the reason is because this is the danger of practicing without knowledge. So it's so important. When I give talks and when I explain to people, I say that you should question everything I say. You shouldn't believe it blindly, and we shouldn't do anything blindly. We should always have a proper understanding of why we're doing such rituals, because otherwise there will be a point where someone will ask us, why do you do this ritual? Why do you pray? Why do you have so many gods? And if we don't have the proper understanding, the proper knowledge, then even as young, whether it's as a young boy or as an older married man, that will create a gap in our faith, and then we'll question why we're doing what we're doing. So it's so important to have this knowledge and gradually. And I think you made a very nice point there as well about how you came to Krishna consciousness and how it's a gradual process. I used to worship Lord Shiva, and it's actually said that it's, my mother-in-law is very much a big worshipper of Durga Mataji. And so if we have such attachment, this worship in one sense it's not bad. These are great devotees of the Lord. So, but what we can do is just slightly adjust our worship and understand that their position. So we still understand Krishna is the supreme because they worship Krishna. But if we can worship Krishna, we can still continue worshiping the devas as well, but just recognize their position in relation. So I think it's, thank you so much again for sharing. And I hope that explains a little bit.
Prabhuji, I didn't know you were 11. At 11, I was in a convent and I was praying to Mother Mary.
Yeah.
And my father used to tell my mother off, why have you sent her to a Christian school? Because I didn't know any gods other than Shiva. But no, Prabhuji, I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were just 11.
Not at all,
Otherwise, I tend to just argue, and I'm learning not to have a challenging attitude from Krishna consciousness. But I just always feel that I'm going to always defend Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma was wiped off from India, and that's how they ruled over us. So today, if anyone is going to say anything about Hinduism, I'm going to first fight and then quietly come to Krishna and apologize, and I'll apologize to all devotees. But Prabhu, I can just imagine you being 11. Thank you, Prabhuji. I'm sorry, forgive me, Prabhu. Thank you.
No problem. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Sandhya Mataji. We like your challenging attitude, and we always enjoy the questions because the debate that goes after that is really fun.
Kirtika Mataji, thank you. Your love is really, you have brought me here. I always am going to be thankful to you, Mataji. Thank you.
Krishna's mercy, even I'm enjoying the mercy. So I've started reading the Bhagavad Gita 2 years ago. And so we are all in the same boat. We have, Prabhuji, at the age of 11, you were ashamed, and I'm 5 times your age at 11, and I didn't know about my own religion. And it is a very common thing with the so-called Hindus or the Sanatan Dharma or the Vaishnavism. But thank you very much for enlightening us, and Krishna consciousness has really shown us the path, and that's why I think everybody is attracted to this path. Panchali, kindly unmute. I'm saying things fast because we are reaching.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you very much for the wonderful class. So my question is 2 very quick questions. It goes back to your talk around the really fortunate souls should try to get out of the prison, and they go to Vaikuntha, but Krishna's favorite is obviously with him in Golok Vrindavan in his 2-hand forms. So my first question is, if a soul goes to one of the Vaikuntha planets, is there an opportunity for those souls to I don't know if upskill is the right word.
Yeah.
Can they actually go to Golok Vrindavan? Is there an opportunity for that? And secondly, because in the Vaikuntha planets it is a mood of awe and reverence, does that mean the 5 main rasas, which is very popular in Golok Vrindavan, they are completely absent in the Vaikuntha planets?
Oh wow! So such an amazing and deep question. Mataji is obviously very, her consciousness is thinking about Goloka Vrindavan, about the Vaikuntha planets. So I'm gonna have to take I'll have to find out exactly. Like it's been a long time since I've talked about or studied about the different planets and what goes on there. All I know is that what happened. So I will endeavor to find the answer from someone more senior, and I'll humbly say that I can't. I can roughly give an answer is that the place where we go to and the relationship we have with Krishna is in accordance with our desire, our deep desire. So some people have that desire to worship Krishna with awe and reverence, in which case they'll happily stay in the Vaikuntha planets. And it talks about this within the Srimad Bhagavatam, about how people will visit Narad Muni. And I think I'm trying to remember the Shastra, I'll get the reference for you, but how he visits this planet and everyone kind of looks the same, behaves in the same way. So yeah, you could be right, but I don't want to speculate. I want to give you a definitive answer. So in that case, I sincerely apologize. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't give you the exact answer of whether one can upgrade. Yeah.
You've given some answers. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry.
No, wonderful question. Thank you for asking.
A tangent of it, probably. Yeah, thank you.
Prabhuji, just a clarification on the same question. Maybe in the Vaikuntha planet, aren't everybody in the four-handed form?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
In awe and reverence and performing the service. While in Golok Vrindavan, you can be a friend of Krishna, or you can see him in the Madhurya Rasa, or you can see him in as your child. So it's a sweeter planet, if I can say that in my
it is. So yeah, that is correct. Yeah. So yes, Mataji. So yes, but at the same time, once you go back to Vaikuntha, you won't come back again. And some may have that desire to worship in awe and reverence, and I can definitely relate to that. There's definitely an aspect of that within myself as well. So it's just but each of us has we have this material body, we have a material form, but we have the what's known as Sarup. And the very, very elevated devotees will know their position as they advance in Krishna consciousness. Someone like Srila Prabhupada, that I'm sure he probably did not reveal this to all but his very intimate associates. They'll know their position in the spiritual world also, and what relationship they have with Krishna. That's only for the most elevated souls. But us, best to just continue to practice the Krishna consciousness. Eventually, Krishna will reveal all to us.
Hare Krishna. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, I know we have exhausted our time. I'd ask Prahlad Prabhu. Prahlad Prabhu, are you there? Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, can you
Hare
just
Krishna.
put on your video just for a second so Kamal Prabhuji can see you as well, so that
Hare Krishna.
met
Hare
him on the
Krishna.
streets, he would recognize you.
And Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna.
Mataji. Thank you for joining in.
Yes, I'm very girl. Come.
Come.
Jai
Then I also have a sister as well.
Yes, and she has a name, Prahlad.
Radhe.
Yes, Jai Radhe. Jai Radhe.
Jai Radhe. So
Jai
Prahlad
Radhe.
is joining us from Nairobi, and that is Jai Radhe. Hare Krishna, Jai Radhe.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining in today. Okay, Prahlad Prabhu, kindly end the session today.
Yes, I would like to first of all thank His Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu for giving us this wonderful summary and presentation of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, as we had recently finished the Bhagavad Gita as it is. So thank you, Prabhu, for giving us this wonderful presentation, this summary, and also your own personal experiences, and as well some advice to go about on, you know, like our current path in Krishna consciousness. So I would like to request everyone to kindly unmute yourselves and let's chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra once for His Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna,
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 Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Rama, Hare Hare.
Pranam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo
Namo
Namo.
Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu ki
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanande.
Hare Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone so much for your kind attention.
Thank
Hope
you,
to see you
Prabhuji.
soon.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes,
Hare
see you
Krishna.
next Monday.
See you next Monday.
We are planning to start the Bhagavatam, but we are debating with our mentors because they still feel that we should go back to the Bhagavad Gita, and we still feel that when will we start reading all those Bhagavatams? So we really want, this is the only time we have, so we want to use it to the maximum. So,
Yeah.
but I'll keep in touch as soon as we make the decision.
Yes, no worries, Mochi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Shobha Mataji, where are you joining from, Mataji?
Actually, I am Kamal's mother.
Okay,
I live,
Jai.
Hare Krishna. I
Hare
live in
Krishna.
London, but at the moment I am in Goa.
Ah, nice, nice. That's a place to be, apart from
Yes.
Kenya, of course. Okay. Thank you for
Lovely
joining.
meeting you, Kartika Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji. Lovely meeting you too. Please kindly join in. Definitely on all Mondays, because we have Kamal Prabhu on Mondays, but on other days, if you have time, kindly join in. Please, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Shobha Mataji.